Hello, welcome to UATV. Now, a new documentary film dedicated to Roman Sushchenko, a Ukrainian journalist that's currently being held prisoner in Russia, has premiered in Kiev today. Now, the journalist who works for the UKRINFORM news agency was travelling to Russia in September last year to visit family when he was arrested. Since then, he's been sentenced. And now in our studio today, we have Mark Feygin, who's the lawyer who is representing Mr. Sushchenko. Mr. Feygin, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, привет, sir.
Can you tell us, first of all, can you give us an update on the situation with Mr. Sushchenko?
Journalist Roman Sushchenko is currently in a Russian prison. This prison is well known from Soviet times as it used to belong to the KGB. As you may know, he's charged with espionage, and this detention has been extended until April 2017. We think that the hearing can take place before the end of this year, but for the rest, he's absolutely fine. He has access to consular assistance, he has an independent lawyer, and as long as it goes the way it's going now, we can count on international support for his release.
And this is very interesting because before you represented Nadiya Savchenko, the Ukrainian fighter pilot. This was a very famous case and it grabbed the international headlines. So I wanted to ask you, how important is this international support in securing the release of these Ukrainian prisoners?
Well, international support is crucial because we are dealing with an authoritarian regime. We're dealing with Russia. President Putin is in charge. Therefore, there is no legal opportunity for us to get justice here in Russia. We believe that political pressure that we have on the Russian authorities, including this international support, is crucial for the freedom of our client. Russia and Ukraine are at war, the war in Donbass. Therefore, political prisoners are the victims and the heroes of this war. If the international support is broad, like it was in Nadiya Savchenko's case, then we'll have a pretty good chance of winning Sushchenko's freedom. Of course, nothing ever happens twice. We can't repeat Savchenko's case. That was different. However, I believe that the special channels for international support that we established for Savchenko, the ones we used to free her, they could work with Sushchenko. And Sushchenko could also be home in Kiev thanks to those international efforts. So I can't overstate my appreciation for any international support.
And I wanted to ask about another prisoner as well, Oleh Sentsov, who is a Ukrainian citizen, but he has been sentenced as a Russian citizen. So from a legal standpoint, how does that change things?
You know, Ukrainian political prisoners are a very specific category. They differ from Russian political prisoners because they're the result of a war between Russia and Ukraine, and they're treated much worse than the Russian ones, because they're enemies of the state in the fullest meaning of the word, not just the system installed by Putin, but the state. They're foreigners who can be exchanged for Russian citizens who might fight in Donbass and who are persecuted in Kiev for crimes committed in Donbass, for actions that took place in the war. That's why freeing Ukrainian political prisoners needs to be done by specific needs. It's different than defending. For me as a lawyer, for our supporters, for human rights activists, for journalists, these cases differ from defending Russian political prisoners. That's why I once again emphasize that international support plays a key role. By virtue of simply being foreigners, Ukrainians imprisoned in Russia are under higher pressure. They can't count on their relatives' support. Their relatives are outside the country. They can't count on the support of their state. It's outside the country. They can't directly communicate with groups of people ready to help them. There are almost no more Russian supporters or people from human rights organizations who are ready to provide assistance. The Russian opposition has been crushed, so these people are in a much worse situation.
And actually, that relates to my next question, actually, because you have an amazing story yourself. You've represented a lot of these political prisoners. But when you go to Russia, what do people say to you? Do they tell you maybe to keep quiet, not to go against the regime?
People like me are hated. People who defend Ukrainian political prisoners, their lawyers are in a peculiar situation. These are singular individuals. The political biographies of people like me are related to Russian opposition against the Putin regime. People like me are in a peculiar situation. Defending Ukrainian political prisoners, we risk ourselves. My colleagues, for example, like Nikolai Polozov in Crimea or Emil Korbedinov, were affected by this. One of them was questioned by the FSB. This is abnormal. When a lawyer is questioned by the FSB about his clients, that's impossible in any other civilized country, but in Russia, it's possible. Emil Korbedinov, the Crimean Tatar lawyer, was held liable. They put him in prison for 10 days. That's why this cluster, this group of people is so small. Nevertheless, it exists, and it does its work. What's happening in Russia is not surprising. We are the outcasts of this society. But that doesn't diminish our work or make it less effective. I think that as a lawyer, I'm very useful for my clients.
Yeah. And why do you pursue all these Ukrainian political prisoner cases? Because in Russia, really, there isn't a fair trial. I mean, really, the odds are stacked against you as soon as you walk into the courtroom. So what's your personal motivation for following up with all these particular court cases? Why do you do this?
Да, действительно, для меня, как для адвоката, важен суд.
For me as a lawyer, the trial in itself is important. The courtroom is a place where I can use my knowledge, my experience, my beliefs to defend my client, even though I do realize there's no such thing as a fair court in Russia. That fact essentially renders my work null and void. I can't rely on the rule of law and defend my clients in the proper sense of the word. But the lawyers in Nazi Germany were in the same kind of situation. The ones in Stalin's USSR found themselves in similar conditions. Granted, these are extreme examples, as there was barely any legal defense and they were unusual trials. But in the Brezhnev era, I knew many lawyers who are still alive who defended dissidents back then. Often they sympathized with their defendants. They supported them. Nevertheless, I believe I'm first and foremost motivated by my inner beliefs. I oppose the war in Ukraine. I oppose the occupation of Crimea. I'm a supporter of political democracy, which we do not have. Nevertheless, people like me, lawyers who are an important part of Russian society, we are the people of an independent profession. We embody the law in Russia. Sure, there's no court in Russia, but there's me. Without people like me, there's nothing. No law, no justice. A defendant would have no one to appeal to. This would totally invalidate everything. Therefore, I believe that my job in Russia's system of justice is to embody the law.
Okay. And one last final question. So there's millions of Ukrainians who live in Russia or they have family in Russia. So, I mean, from a certain perspective, are they in danger as well of being arrested or persecuted, anything like this?
I believe that the millions of Ukrainian citizens who either work or visit relatives in Russia or visit because of some business ties put themselves in danger by visiting Russia, especially in moments of escalation like we have right now with the developments in Avdiivka and some other places. Why? Because Russian authorities, secret services, are seeking out those who can be used for their own means, those who can be arrested, persecuted for them, to either be exchanged later or be convicted and sent to prison. The ones who are particularly in danger are journalists, public figures, politicians, human rights activists, Ukrainian ATO veterans, military servicemen, retired military, and many others who happen to be somehow involved in the current events. So I definitely do not recommend visiting Russia. If Roman Sushchenko had perhaps decided against making this trip, he might be free and at home right now. I believe they should not visit Russia. Right now, it's a very dangerous thing to do.
Okay, Mr. Feygin, thank you very much, and best of luck with your case with Mr. Sushchenko.
Thank you.
This is UATV.